Good morning, everyone, and welcome to September and back to school and another episode of the Tree Planters podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Margaret, and as almost usual, I guess you're our first repeat offender here, Robert. But
that's I'll take that as a high privilege and
oh no, turn off.
Music wasn't quite done yet.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to rejig our. Well, sorry. So first of all, we're joined by Robert Brown, executive director of the Oak Ridges Save the Oak Ridges Moraine. And apologies for that song. It's done when you add a song to a scene in this platform that we use. It automatically defaults to repeat, infinite repeat, and I don't know why. That seems like an odd default setting to me. But anyways, I forgot to turn it off, which I've done now. So hopefully we won't be bothered by that again.
So now we can get started.
One of these days, we'll actually have an episode that goes perfectly smooth.
I'm glad that I get to witness the learning process of the new app that you're using here.
Yeah, we're so happy it's public learning.
It's a public service. Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, to be fair, if I was going to spin this one way, one thing Adam and I do try to talk a lot about is about taking risks and not making everything seem so polished. And so making mistakes kind of becomes more of like normal thing. So consider this public service. We're normalizing mistakes and
yeah.
We've honestly been talking about that a lot. Like the fact, like the detail that we would like to respond to, like some of the EROs or some of the work that we're doing is much greater than what we can at times. And I think that's the survival mechanism in the political environment right now. Like you need to be able to make those mistakes and you need to get work out there despite, maybe it not being exactly perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
He's thinking.
I mean, it's interesting. Like I feel like there's a bit of a balancing question here too, because I mean that's making me think a little bit of that. What is it? Move fast, break things. Silicon Valley kind of strategy, which also seems to be a little bit of the Ford government strategy when it comes to climate and environment, and we don't want to go there. So maybe a little bit more sort of prudence in our approach would be good. I, that's my Post-it note on my forehead for today.
Yeah.
But
there you go.
Who knows? Maybe there's value to both approaches in certain measures. I guess when you throw one out, then maybe things become problematic.
I've been trying to. Sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
Go ahead, Robert.
No, I said we've been trying to classify. We were talking about Ford and like Ford government and those kind of terms, and then we were trying to like figure it out. But it's like I don't know. Like it's a very specific breaking of things, and especially in the environmental regulation, it's stuff that's like delayed in space and time. And I think what I started thinking more about was Rob Nixon's work on slow violence. I don't know are you familiar with that stuff, Adam?
No.
It's Robert Nixon, but wrote this book called Slow Violence, and what he was talking about is the way that governments degrade environmental policies and make these changes that are long in time and space. So they're not immediately present and they're not sensational. So they're all kind of delayed. They're all very, very, it's a slow violence it takes. And I think that's kind of maybe what the Ford government learned after COVID. Like when they kind of did that, big shift, they didn't want to take the sensational approach. They started to listen to experts. And then I think we saw that kind of in what they're doing with their environmental policy too. It's, we're not going to attack like flooding, which would be a very sensational event that would happen, but, climate change policy, or we're going to change petitions to take water, which is, seemingly really, really benign, but over the course of time, over a couple decades, that could actually be really, really profound. And I think that's kind of how they're hedging their bets. Like if it's not immediately visible, if it's not sensational, if it's something that their marketing machine can handle, then I think that's kind of been their targets as of late. I don't know. We can
Mm.
agree or
Well,
disagree on it.
it's a good segue, to be honest, Robert, because today we're talking about the Greenbelt. And so 2025 is a pretty important year for the Greenbelt for two reasons. One, it's its 20th birthday. And two, written within the Greenbelt Act is a requirement that the government of the day review the Greenbelt plan every 10 years. So we're now at our 20th birthday for the Greenbelt, but also this would be the year of a mandatory review by the province. And so the Greenbelt has been very sensational for this government. Uh, it's probably, in my mind, one of the few real sticky kind of controversies that has not kind of like faded. It seems weird the amount of sticky situations and controversies, scandals, if you will, that this government has been involved in. And most of them, I don't know if people are just tired, just kind of feels like, meh, another Monday, no big deal. But the Greenbelt has been one of those ones that I think has kind of stuck a little bit more in the craw of the public. So yeah, what you made a pause there, Adam, which means that you're thinking about something, you want to say something.
Uh, well, no, it was just, I mean, that sort of backlash, the public backlash to the changes they tried to do to the Greenbelt, juxtaposed with the current height that this government has in the polls, right? They've
Mm-hmm.
never been more popular, at least according to polls, which generally I kind of pretty heavily discount opinion polling outside of election cycles. But for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also that I agree with you. I think the polling also is not just an indicator of the government, but an indicator of alternatives, indicator of where, like if there doesn't seem to be someone else that would do a better job, then yeah, this is good enough, right? So let's dig into it a little bit because we're according to legislation, they're supposed to be doing a Greenbelt review. I want to talk a little bit about today. About what happened in the last one, kind of where we are. Robert's here representing the Oak Ridges Moraine, which is one component of the Greenbelt. There's three specific parts of the Greenbelt. There's the Niagara Escarpment. There's the Oak Ridges Moraine. Both of those have their own acts and plans. And then the rest is protected countryside, which is under the Greenbelt plan. So we wanted to talk a little bit about where we've come from, where we're going, and what we would like to see, assuming that a review is happening this year, because it should be according to the legislation. Who wants to do the history? Or Adam, what were you
No,
guys?
I'm just curious, like, what do we like? What happens if it doesn't? Like the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. I mean,
Right. Well, how about we put that on the parking lot, because that is a part of a discussion of like what are the things that are going to happen if it does or doesn't go through. And there's also no, we can talk about the criteria because it's not really written as like this is what the review must comprise, and it's not very detailed, so it gives a wide berth to what could potentially happen.
hmm.
But did you guys want me?
I
Sorry.
was just gonna say, should we also like mention your one of your other hats as on the steering committee?
Oh yeah, we could. We could. I'm the chair of the Ontario Greenbelt Alliance on the steering committee there. So that's a little bit of other work we do. So I guess I'm like Greenbelt diva.
Mm-hmm.
Not much diva. Not much diva. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning of the Green Belt. Niagara Escarpment Plan came first. That goes all the way up. It's like Tobermory down to Niagara Falls. Obviously follows along the landform. And then the Oak Ridges Moraine came next. And one thing that you might want to talk about, Robert, or one thing that Debbie had said to me, and it might have been something we talked about in the podcast before, but was the Oak Ridge Moraine Conservation Plan was put in under Mike Harris. And she was explaining, now Debbie is the stalwart of the Storm Coalition. I mean, she was one of those original people that were fighting for the Moraine before it had a plan, everything else. And she was saying that the context of the Oak Ridges Moraine plan was that they had been working very, very hard to try to get recognition of this landform, of its importance within municipalities, within the provincial government, and we're getting nowhere. Like we're not being received at all. Nobody was open to it. And they were at the point, from what I remember, of like, I don't know if we're ever going to get this, even though there's protests, there's all kinds of activity happening to try to get it. It just didn't seem like there was a political opening to make it even possible. And then Walkerton happened, and people died, and other people were horribly affected by the poisoning. And all of a sudden, water and the sanctity of water became a key mandate for the Mike Harris government, and an opening came out. So
yeah, magically appeared. Yeah, and I think that they had done so much work behind it. They had mobilized so hard. They had organized so many communities that it became, I think, yeah, when that opening happened, they were able to capitalize on it very, very, very quickly. Um,
mm-hmm.
and I think it's always kind of made sense. I had someone ask me the other day. They're like, "Hey, why do we have the Oak Ridges Moraine in this predominantly conservative GTA, like 905 area? Like, how did that happen? Why has it always been conservative? Is there a link there?" And I thought that was a really, really interesting question, because I think in a way it's something, yeah, they kind of got forced into doing, and they didn't really want to do it. And when they did do it, they did it in a very kind of like neoconservative way. You'll notice that, like, we have a very strong policy behind it, an act that is, legislated and protects the Oak Ridges Moraine. But at the same time, we don't have something like the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So, like, the protection and oversight of the moraine is all based on basically volunteers, right? Like, we don't have any oversight like that. There was never any really big monitoring program that was put into place to kind of understand the land use changes that were happening on the moraine. And I think the reality is they just didn't. They didn't want to fund it. They didn't want to have a massive government commission. But I think when it's based on volunteerism, and when it's based on the mobilization of charities, there's also a lot of control that the government can exert there as well, by where they allocate funds, and who gets them, and that kind of stuff. So I think that was one of the big, I think, smart plays under the Harris government, even though I don't think it's been, now we're seeing the effects of it now. But yeah, but it also, I think it played well to their base at the time. Like, I think it helped them consolidate the Oak Ridges Moraine and the 905 as like a conservative stronghold. And I think it really helped them in recent years. It's helped them solidify that as a kind of like that kind of perspective space, a protected rural space outside of the GTA, and where they've been able to like consolidate a lot of power there. So I think in the long run, it was quite smart for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of funny though when we fast forward. So the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan came to be, and we don't have a map here today, but the Oak Ridges Moraine goes kind of east-west under Lake Simcoe across the northern part of the GTA. The Niagara Escarpment kind of goes north-south. And then in 2005, Delta McGuinty wins the premiership and commits to protecting, really, from what I understand from people, that, because I wasn't involved in that fight, but there was a lot of concerns about the buffers around the Niagara Escarpment and buffers around the Oak Ridges Moraine. And they were worried about encroachment, and ecologically it needed to be like a big demonstration of what these particular landscapes meant to Ontario. And so 2005, the Greenbelt was enacted. It, again, provided what they call a protected countryside around the Oak Ridges Moraine and the Niagara Escarpment, and connected the two through policy, at least for the protected countryside. The Greenbelt Plan was pretty controversial, especially by farmers, even though the policies are actually pretty agricultural first. Like, there is quite a lot that goes into protecting agricultural land base. And Dr. Wayne Caldwell out of the University of Guelph had done studies about at the 10-year review about what was the land use change in farmland outside the Greenbelt or farmland inside the Greenbelt. And basically, the loss of farmland within the Greenbelt was next to nil. Outside of the Greenbelt, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. So then we fast forward to 2015, and that was under the time of Kathleen Wynne, and she started the Coordinated Land Use Review to look at all of the policies that dictate how we use land, what gets protected, what doesn't get protected, where gets what growth goes where, how water is, all of those things. I call it the land abuse system more than the land use system. But David Crombie, the former mayor of Toronto, headed that panel up, and it included developers, ecologists, biologists, planners, farmers, municipalities, and was a huge undertaking, which took, as far as I remember, it was close to 2 years. By the time, it was a very, the people were, they did open houses across Ontario. SEGC was around. That was by the time we formed, because we wanted to be a part of this conversation. And so then that's where the Coordinated Land Use Review, and they were trying to see, how do we harmonize all of these plans so that it makes sense and that we're protecting water and farmland, and how do we make growth still accessible? And out of that came the Crombie panel report, and that there was lots of recommendations, and people can look into those, but one of the ones that's most pertinent to our conversation today was the commitment that the Greenbelt needed to be bigger, that it needed to be stronger and protect areas of hydrological significance, including the moraines and rivers and wetlands. This is like the interlude, because this is
all right. I was trying to transition to the map. There we go.
So anyways, you can see the Greenbelt is the lighter green for those that are watching at home. The Oak Ridge Moraine is the east-west, which is that kind of teal. And then the Niagara Escarpment is the north-south part. Anyways, so he agreed that the panel agreed that there should be a larger Greenbelt, that it should factor in areas of hydrological significance. And out of that came the Greenbelt Council, which he headed up, which is now pretty much defunct.
As far as I can see, and if they are going to reuse the council, the first order has to be that the council has to be entirely repopulated. I think you're right. It's completely defunct now. It had one member as of maybe last year.
Yeah.
I think everyone has since resigned.
Yeah. And the part of that is that David Crombie actually headed up the first Greenbelt Council and had got planners and developers and farmers to sit on this panel, this council. And then a lot of them quit en masse because of the changes the Ford government was making about water. And I can't remember now, seems like someone else would be like, oh, that was Bill this, whatever. I don't remember. Yeah. But it was done in protest. And the Greenbelt Council went within a matter of a week down to one member. And then the Ford government tried to reinitiate it, get people on, and that worked for a while. And now it just kind of sat there like a relic. And everyone's terms expired. And there's one person, I think, whose term was up in June, and that's about it. Anyways, and then we get into 2017, the Greenbelt, again under Kathleen Wynne, was grown to urban river valleys. And also they did a protecting water based on the recommendations from the Crombie panel about where the Greenbelt should be grown. Pertinent to our conversation was Simcoe County, and kind of Mono were seen as one of the big places, as well as areas around Waterloo. And then politics changed, and the proposal to make sure these places had the protection, because both in Simcoe and Waterloo, groundwater is a very finite resource, and most of the water supplied in Simcoe is groundwater. So, that's people's livelihoods, and not only businesses, but drinking water, daily use water. coming from a very finite, misunderstood source. Did I
Mhm.
miss anything?
No, I think that's right. I think I remember. So this is when I kind of got my start with Storm, was during the last review period. Like I was picked up by Earth Roots, and I think it was a coordination between Storm, Earth Roots, and Ontario Nature that were doing
Yeah.
this massive, like, deep canvassing project across the Oak Ridges Moraine. And I was lucky to be one of those team leaders that was working with canvassers. And at that point in time, where most of my work was purely academic, I got to start speaking with people outdoors about what was going on in the moraine, a landscape that I'd grown up in. Like I grew up on the moraine, I was born here, I've moved back here since. And it was really, I think, enlightening, like really just to see like that the depth of um the depth of the outreach that happened through that process literally extended to like individual homeowners. Like we were taking very, very detailed records of what everyone was saying, whatever people like feeling, and reporting this all back to go feed into, the reporting and the review that was happening. So it was like that Crombie review was literally massive and thoroughly inclusive. Like it was actually amazing in its
Mhm.
scope, breadth, depth. Like the work that it did is really the high bar of anything that could possibly done. It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. The interestingly enough, that little coalition there, you might have worked with someone named Josh at Earthroots.
Josh, yeah, Josh Garfinkel.
Yep. So
Yeah.
Josh Garfinkel and I were in touch because we were working on some issues around Midhurst. And he's like, hey, there's this thing happening. I think if you pulled some people around a table and talked about this coordinated land use review, like it'd be really interesting to have this conversation. And that's how SCGC got its start. Josh came up. We pulled 12, 15 groups across Simcoe County together to talk about this opportunity that frankly we didn't know that much about because it was just the very beginning of it. And he was like, hey, this is what and to be very, very fair. I was aware of the Greenbelt. I don't know about how initiated Adam was at the time. I was aware of it, but really like pretty separated from it. I was hyper local, focused on Midhurst. Wasn't really sure where the Greenbelt was, where it ended, where it started, because we were just really focused on some local issues. And then when Josh was like, "Well, just so you know, the Greenbelt is actually one of these plans that if you put it in the right places, you can protect the things that need to be protected, but then you can still focus on where growth goes in the proper places." And for people around the table who were watching wetlands being paved, farmlands being raised and built on, like it felt like this scatter shot of fighting all these little fires. And we were like, oh, that would be a really good idea if we could figure out how to actually delineate growth areas from non-growth areas and make it stick.
Hmm.
Like that's
Hmm.
half of our battle right there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So good old Josh Garfinkel was, and so we were like, so what do we do with this now that we know this is going on? He's like, well, you should meet with David Crombie. You should go down to Queens Park. You should meet with people. And we're like, well, what are we gonna? We can't just go as like Margaret and Sandy and Mark. Like, what are we gonna do? And they were like, well, we just call ourselves something. Just start there, and then so we got Adam to do a logo a little bit later, but one person's like, why don't we just call ourselves the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition? And that's just how it started. It was completely organic. And then that 12 moved to 47. So we built the infrastructure around it, but at the beginning, it was really just to figure out how we could be a part of this review process.
Oh, that's amazing. Josh was a very, very good canvasser. He was very, very good working door to door, like,
Yeah.
and he was very, very good at bringing people together. So I'm not surprised by
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Adam might remember this. Remember, we pulled together with the review. They were having South Shore Center was one of the places, and we were handing out pamphlets and things. And I had people yell at me about about the Greenbelt, and we had municipalities all over us about the Greenbelt shouldn't be grown. We're never going to have enough space to build and
But that, I
overall.
think, yeah, that was the great thing, though. Like, I think in that canvassing experience, that was like getting yelled at people by people was like one of the great things. Like you would get,
Maybe for you.
no, yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm like
I don't like it.
I am a 6'2", 200-pound white dude, so I don't get intimidated by people too often. But there was, but I mean, like having, and we talked about this like off bar about what you're doing in Wasaga right now and how you're approaching it. But we are actually having like meaningful discussions over things we disagreed about. And I think that was perhaps one of the most important things that happened there is that we were having candid conversations face to face about differences of opinion. And maybe when you walked away from that, you had a better appreciation of what other people were thinking, you know? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is something that is we've lost recently.
For sure.
So that's that. I mean, that really makes me think about sort of that phase when we started and the activities we were engaged with. Uh, and I mean, a lot of those activities were sort of conversations that we were having, whether it was through sort of publishing, on our site or letters to the editor, things like that, or submitting pieces to municipalities or submitting pieces to the province. Uh, but it really was a very dynamic conversation there for about a year, right around that review process. A
Yeah.
lot of people were highly engaged for a wide variety of reasons, which ran the gamut from ones that we perfectly agreed with to ones that we vehemently opposed,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all of the reactions in between that we would get from people, on those various places in the spectrum. And I mean, what's interesting about the whole thing is that's an exercise in democracy and a recognition that these crucial decisions that are very, very central to the future of our province and our society, the way that we live together, is valuable and needs to be supported. And I think a really big distinction between then and now is the government supported those conversations, right? They enabled them with, setting up those locations and facilitating them
Matt.
and eliciting feedback and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, perhaps it's a little difficult to know really what the outcome of it was because things changed quite quickly after that. Who knows what would have continued to have been implemented in the future if a different government had been in power. Um, but but that exercise in sort of eliciting that public's participation and trying, really wanting to hear voices from across the spectrum and putting that into the decision making matrix is is really a pretty stark contrast to what we have now, where
Mm-hmm.
it's been years of rollbacks to public participation in decision making and continued centralization and consolidation in where that decision making is located, primarily in the premier's office or a step below in ministers' offices. MZO is being one example. So it's just the contrast is interesting and illustrative, I think, of the different approaches of this government and the way that they make decisions. And I think that we can also get into like the types of outcomes that we have as a province that arrive through these different decision making processes. I mean, I think one is more optimal and one is less optimal. We can talk about that, I guess, but I think that's just it's an interesting comparison to kind of paint.
Mm-hmm. And I think that to your point, Robert, and also picking up on what you're saying, Adam, is like the that whole review process about the green belts and about how we manage growth and whatever didn't end up in a perfect product, a perfect outcome, but there was a real listening exercise.
Mhm.
Because one of the things that I think we forget, and this is the naivety of me when I started this stuff. I mean, now I feel kind of silly about it, but I really kind of did not think or I was not aware of how political protection and conservation is. I really just assumed that when people say we really care about this forest, we really care about that wetland, that comes with an ethos of like, I will do anything to make sure that it's protected. That means I'll put legislation on it. I'll advocate for it. And what came of it was that what I took from that conversation was they say that they care about it, but actually that's not entirely true in the way that it would mean for me. That they're like, well, also we have to think about this and we have to think about business interests and we have to think about, and it gets slowly relegated to the bottom of the list. And the amount of pushback we got from municipalities, some various municipalities, from some farmers, we had some farmers that were supportive, some that were against. Um, it was really a high conflict time. I would say it was dynamic, but my perception of it was very fraught. I had some really really terrible emails sent to me, like like as if I was the spawn of the devil, and I was so flabbergasted that talking about protecting land and water, making it more accessible, how it could end up in such a spot where I'm like, hold on here. I'm not trying to destroy things. You guys, did you misread what I was trying to say?
Mhm.
But according to their identity and how they stake the world out, I was a threat to them because it means, that exploitation wasn't as easy. The benefit,
Well,
you know,
I mean that like we're using some slightly loaded terms here. I mean, I think a
oh
lot of
yeah,
the
it
and
was
certainly a
loaded for
lot of
me.
the yeah. Well, and a lot of people who they a lot of their sort of emotion came from a perception that government was telling them what to do with their land, right? And sort of imposing this stricture on them, limiting their freedom. And we see like that whole narrative. It's actually a little bit interesting. I think that the Greenbelt and in the environment haven't figured. I mean, they have a little bit the environment more broadly in a lot of the conspiracy theories that gained traction through COVID, but that sort of overlap with kind of government telling me what to do. I think.
As I understand it, and I wasn't around for this period of the implementation of the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan, but this in the early years, the implementation, there's exactly what you are expressing, Margaret. On one hand, there's a lot of outrage about, and what Adam's saying, there's a lot of outrage about people being restricted as to what they could do with their land. There is kind of like this kind of like libertarian bend in it where, and I think that played into like a very kind of conservative narrative. Like you create these kind of like, I don't know, there's these kind of protected spaces in very clear ways, like protected that they could build enclave communities, or protected in that, whatever, rural kind of thing that you were looking to enshrine there. But at the same time, now what we're seeing later on in the road is, now I talk to people and they're like, hey, I wanted to do this on my property. There were so many restrictions. It was so hard. And I met every one of them. Now it becomes a source of pride. They're like, yeah, there was a lot of restrictions. It was really hard. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. But now they're very they feel like connected to what they've done. They're like, okay, I upheld the plan. Like I did what I was supposed to do. And then alternatively, they get super mad when someone comes in and violates the plan. So I think they're like, well, I did all my due diligence. I went through this whole massive process and changed my build to accommodate, X, Y, and Z. And now, after the fact, when a developer comes in and kind of overrides those kind of planning restrictions, they're really, really, really mad. And I think
Mhm.
that's something we need to harness.
Well, it comes with that change management model, right? Like
Yeah.
eventually they adopt it. And similarly, the some of the loudest voices against the Greenbelt plan was enacted were farmers. And now you have many of the farm organizations across Ontario that are supportive of the Greenbelt. And the idea of, they're like, well, that would be really interesting to make sure all farmland across Ontario is protected the same way that it's protected in the Greenbelt. That would be, so there has been a shift. Um, But now the question is, as we're kind of moving from the history of that review, and we don't know. I mean, we know what the outcome was as far as politically. The Protecting Water initiative to grow the Greenbelt in those places that I mentioned was ready to be adopted, as far as I understand, from that government, although it was kind of right at the end of the electoral reign. And then the new government came in, and we know that it was rejected. Was it based on ideology? Likely, but we don't know the behind the scenes of why it got so rejected so thoroughly.
I
But I
mean, we know
remember,
a little bit about the behind the scenes from the video from the back room with Ford and
oh
Miller.
yeah, open up the green belt for development. You're
Yeah.
right.
Listen, I
Um,
just want to I want to take a second because we usually I leave this to the end, and then sometimes I also forget. Um, but for listeners out there, if you like what you hear, if you are a fan of this podcast, leave us a rating on your platform, and that really helps with other people being able to discover the podcast. And of course, you can visit our website, simcoecountygreenbelt.ca, for all kinds of other information, as well as to find past episodes. And Robert, do you want to drop a little promotion for Storm?
Um, yeah, I guess we're Storm Coalition. As Margaret mentioned, we are one of the original organizations that fought for and participated in the creation of the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. So we've been around for 35 plus years now, I believe. And yeah, so after usually we would pop up and down to defend the moraine plan during these kind of review periods, or that's what we've done in the past. But since about 2018, we've been taking a different tack, given all the different kind of policy changes that have been happening and the way that the moraine plan has become under threat. We are kind of setting ourselves up more permanently now. And what we've been trying to do is work with local communities to help support their kind of land use planning advocacy when they're attempting to protect the moraines. So we've built out a bunch of resources on our website now. And a lot of it's around, we're trying to set up a monitoring program. This is like through successive plan reviews. One of the major recommendations has been is that changes on the moraine and in the Greenbelt need to have a clear, transparent monitoring framework. It's always been a recommendation. It's never been adopted. And I think now, in the advent of the digitization of council records and decision making and all that kind of stuff, we're now in a position where we can collect this data and start tracking at least those, the public decision, the decisions that go to council. We can kind of collect them, review them, and kind of see what each council has been doing on the moraine. So we're doing this. It was an old program, a Moraine Watch program that used to be a pen and paper exercise for residents to kind of report changes on the moraine, but now we're kind of digitizing it. So that's our major push right now. Building out the GIS for that, the mapping for that, but also now putting together a database of changes. And I think when that's done, what I'm really concerned about is what they call as of right approvals. So the approvals that go through that conform to the plan, like we have no idea how the actual developments that conform with the plan are affecting the moraine, whether or not they're upkeeping, the ecological and hydrological protections, or whether or not they're degrading them. Like for one instance, it's like we have a huge issue with temporary approvals. Like, I don't think through this research, I don't think I've seen any approval that's actually temporary. I think they get renewed every 10 years. I've never seen anyone canceled unless the business has gone defunct. And another one would be the square footage allocations on homes. Like, I don't know, on my section of the moraine, what we see a lot of is like these massive palatial homes that are divided off of farmlands. And I'm pretty curious about what that's doing with the cumulative effects of all these kind of like palatial investment homes that are going up across the moraine. That are, as of right, allowed, they're legal. But I'm curious, like, what kind of, how much tree coverage are we losing? Because I think it seems like none of those folks like forests. Like so I'm just curious about like kind of things like that, and that's going to be a much harder question, because from far as I can see, talking to planning departments across the Moraine, is that they don't have sophisticated ways of tracking. A lot of them don't have sophisticated ways of tracking that, and they actually internally they don't know themselves. So the need for a comprehensive monitoring program is high. Um,
Mhm.
and Yeah,
And
so
that's true across most of the places, I would say, even outside of the Moraine. And one of the things that was really difficult for the Crombie panel during the review is that there just wasn't a lot of data.
mhm.
Municipalities didn't have a lot of data beyond like housing starts, like that, but of how the Greenbelt plan was working. Most of the data that we have about that is from the NGO sector that has to hire consultants to do the studying. The government wasn't providing any of that data and still isn't. And I think my boss, my old boss, rattles around my head saying, you measure what you care about. And so it's fine to set up all of these plans and policies, but if you're not actually measuring whether they're effective, you're kind of just going blind and assuming the policy work will take care of itself. And policies, as we know, can always be, shifted around. Maybe I meant more like this. Maybe it's, argue it at the OLT that really this was more the intent of it. I mean, we know how it all goes, right? Like the policy just gets weakened. But anyways, going back to where we were there before the diversion, if you will, was talking about how when the Ford government took over, and Adam was saying about like in the background, that's when all the videos came out about we're going to sell the Greenbelt to developers, right? Like, or when he was speaking to people in before he got elected, and that was a faux pas that he had to go back. So we do know that was kind of the ideology of the government, and so the proposal about where the Greenbelt was going to grow and how it was going to be strengthened pretty much was turfed.
We also know that like a significant amount of the funding that they got for their campaign came from developer and developer connections, right?
Yeah, we do know
Um, and I also was curious. So this is in the back of my mind a little bit too. Like reflecting back on that review process, and we have just mentioned how contentious and fiery it could be at times. Are there in sort of an ideal scenario, and maybe looking forward, looking ahead, are there things that you would have changed or would change for a future review, or perhaps before even getting to that future review? I don't know if it's worth kind of theorizing about what you think they'll do or about what we think they'll do, um, versus what we hope they'll do. Um, yeah, but I guess maybe just starting with the past, with the previous one, or how do you think that there could have been a better outcome if there had been different processes in place?
From my perspective, the past process was pretty robust. And if there was any criticism, some people felt it was too robust. It took too long. It was too expensive. So um, I don't think that process needs to be emulated again.
What
But
about diffusing some of that, some of the, the tension and stuff like that, like a different way of framing things, or of engaging and involving people, and
maybe my perspective on it was that um, it starts to get personal. You're talking about my property, my neighbors, my community. And so I think some of those, especially as some of the communities were still adjusting with the idea of the Green Belt. And in Simcoe in particular, we were known by the province as the Wild West of development because it just was like, you can grow here and you get a development plan and you get and everybody gets one, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
So it was, seen as a restriction. I don't know if the government could have done anything different to diffuse it, but I think it was really good that they had the conversations. I mean, they try to be pretty down the line of neutral, of like, this is important and we should protect water and let's talk about where we should protect it. The one thing I would say is that when you come out with a framing that is so clear and urgent, like we need to protect water, the fact that there wasn't immediate actions taken made the whole thing seem a little disingenuous. And that was something I remember talking to that the panel about afterwards when Crombie held in his report or handed in his report, and we met with some people within the government, and they were like, we think that this is like, here's how we would like to put forward these ideas, and this is the feedback we got, and so now we're going to do the protecting water initiative. I was like, but you just went through this whole thing about how water farmland is really important, and now just before the election you're putting forward a proposal when really, if it's as dire as what your data says, then your ability should be to act, right? And I think that kind of made it difficult too, because people knew that they were getting close to an election, and so the protecting water initiative was kind of seen as an electoral ploy versus a real desire. So
So
like, I
yeah,
think they should have taken the ones that, like, if Waterloo and Simcoe were the ones that were really the hard, these are the urgent places to grow. Now we're 10 years later. They should have taken steps to grow. They've already done the big consultation. They've already talked to everything. They didn't need to do another 4-month consultation. And then they could have done like a phase 1, phase 2 to show people, like, we actually mean this. This is not just us trying to
yeah.
get elected, right?
One thing I think about though with that with the approach that was taken, is it was almost like an not really an all or nothing, but like, we are going to sort of determine the scope through this process, and then once that scope is determined, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be implemented. But think about what we were just talking about in terms of the success of the current government, right? And their sort of kind of approach from the side, so you don't really see it happening, and in sort of small steps, a little bit like this boiling the frog approach, and how they've had a fair degree of success with that in terms of really implementing a certain vision that has been quite destructive for the environment in a lot of ways. Why couldn't something like that also be successful, but in support of environmental protections, where you're really sort of focusing on more granular assets, almost from from the conservation authority approach, where you're really looking at those granular assets on the ground and how you can encourage and support them. And then to the extent that they kind of overlap with private property and whatnot, that's almost on an as-is basis, rather than that sort of enforced implementation from on high kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where there's a sweet spot there between implementation of just like bull in a china shop to almost making it so laborious that's like one commission after another commission after another commission, and then in the end you still haven't ended up anywhere. And like I said, I would argue after 2 years of the coordinated land use review, after a really thorough panel by broad stakeholders, that you had enough information. Like, you had enough
Yeah.
information.
Well, but
It
then
was exhausting, right? Like, I don't know how you felt after it, Margaret, but I remember being exhausted and super disappointed. Like, we'd put in a ton of labor to kind of shift that scale. A
Yeah.
lot of money was spent, and that was perhaps also Liberal money at the time. I don't know, but a lot of money was spent to do that work, and then to see very, very little of it, it disfranchised a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So your question was, what would I want to see going forward for this review? I mean, we're kind of wrapping up here. Like, my biggest concern is that a review happens, but it is like just a checkbox. And similar to what you're saying, Adam, about how they come at things sideways. They put something on the Environmental Registry of Ontario for 60 days. They ask some questions. Developers have now a process to kind of get what they want to get. Like, that's what my concern is that it's posed as a legitimate review, but really is just a way to kind of open up policies that shouldn't be touched. And so if they don't do the review, I mean, maybe that means someone else, some other party at some other time will do it. So I'm less concerned about not doing a review, but I think it's more likely a review is going to happen. And my fear it's going to be not as evidence based. I mean, if you go with track record, you can't say that much of their policy is based on evidence,
Well, that's
right?
also like as you mentioned before, though, Margaret. Like they have without having the monitoring programs in effect. Like when we're going around and we're speaking to councils or we're arguing against motions that they're making, they are able to argue that there will be no environmental impacts, and we know as a fact that they don't have the data to be able to say that, and yet they
Oh,
kind of have this weaponized blindness that they're using, where they can essentially say anything, they can market anything when they don't have that data, when it doesn't exist, and
Mhm.
when, as you say, like if I want to contest someone's like hydrological report, I need to come up with $60,000 to do that.
Yeah.
And then you go to the OLT, and then maybe your the evidence that you do have isn't valid because it doesn't fit into the very stringent guidelines of what the OLT can consider. Like, and it becomes a massive. It's problematic.
given the third rail nature of Greenbelt, at least to date, for this government, what do you think? And like, what would they be looking for that would be advantageous to them in a review process? So they like at least based on past, and this maybe changes a little bit with their current sitting in polls, but I'm not sure how certain they would feel about that because they
They
know
don't want to
polling.
say the word greenbelt. Like,
No, so that's why I'm
so
wondering,
that's
is like, why would they engage in this if they don't have to?
that's the
Well,
other. Like, yeah,
it just because they engage in it doesn't mean that they're going to, like, we've seen so many times where they do policy drops on a Friday, right? Late on a Friday, and then they manage to do something over Christmas, and then
This
they
isn't
do it for
quite a
4 weeks.
policy drop, though, right? I don't think that we can put it in that bucket.
but I
Like,
would say
just in terms of their
I would
history with the Greenbelt and how sort of that seems to be pretty firmly locked into the public. And I could be reading it wrong, but as soon as the public hears Ford and Greenbelt, immediately they think one thing, right?
Hmm.
I mean, they're not going to. It's not positive.
But the other thing too, and you pointed out earlier, is that even with the Greenbelt scandal, they're still doing well in the polls, and they have what, two and some odd years left before
Well,
they go
yeah.
again,
So I guess
right?
we're still waiting to hear about the RCMP
Yeah.
investigation, all that sort of stuff. Uh, so that would complicate because I guess that's maybe springish. Maybe I forget. I
Who
thought
knows?
I
who knows?
kind of feel like we're waiting for Godot on the RCMP. Like I don't know
Yeah,
that that's
yeah.
when it shows up, whether or not it will be as
But
hopeful or effective as we want it to be.
but I think the polling has more to do with Trump and Carney and Polyev than it
And
has to
opposition.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the total ineffectual opposition. Than it has to do, and all the Greenbelt stuff predated that, right? So I'm not sure. I mean, at least if I were some of his strategies, I wouldn't be super confident thinking that the Greenbelt is something that we can kind of disregard.
Yeah, I don't really know. I've heard people within the conservative world say that, this is a chance for us to do it right. So
By that, what do you mean? Like bright for
for
bright,
them
bright?
to turn the page on the green belt, to no longer be seen as the enemy of the green belt, but to
Okay,
be seen as good. Now, I don't know what that means, but
but conceivably that's pissing off some of their main backers, which
right,
want them to do wrong in the Greenbelt.
This
which is
government's
where,
also, yeah, they're good
go
with
ahead,
clear
Kevin.
stiffs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So the greenbelt boundaries are now within legislation. They can't be just taken out easily anymore. So I think, and Robert, we were talking about this before we started. One of the concerns is they harmonized a greenbelt plan in a way that the protective places lose their special protections, like the moraine and the escarpment, and they harmonize to a weaker thing to talk about efficiencies. It's going to be
we
about
need
efficiencies and red tape and how difficult it is to build things, and highways, all that sort of stuff. My biggest fear is that it's going to be a very cursory review that nibbles away at policy, similar to how it's been done with other environmental legislation, that people go, it's not that big of a deal, but you have to get into the weeds to understand how big of a deal it is. And by then you've lost the public. So they could do something flashy and say, we're going to expand the Greenbelt, let's say 5,000 acres. I don't know, I'm just making up a number. But also, and we're going to make sure the Greenbelt is enshrined in the public for climate change. Like, they can throw all kinds of fancy stuff around it, and then pull all kinds of other little things into it, saying, well, now we're going to harmonize it. Every place is going to be just as protected as the Greenbelt, which people in the Oak Ridges Moraine and the Niagara Escarpment would know that's not actually true.
Yeah.
But it pulls us into a discussion that we have to go through the weeds to get people to understand. And because people think they know the Greenbelt, but then don't know actually the policy levers in it, it becomes a losing PR battle for us in a way, right?
Yeah,
Because we're now going to be fighting against the Greenbelt, but we're not fighting against it. But we're like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it can.
No, I think you're completely right. I think what we look at is it's a Friday drop. It gets dropped alongside something as outrageous as pulling the bike lanes out of Toronto. Like they'll split Toronto against the
using the notwithstanding clause to pull the bike lanes.
Yeah, like they'll do something like launch something else crazy that distracts Toronto while they can focus on the 905. And then, yeah, they make these massive structural changes, which I was calling, like, they make these these slow, violent changes, structural changes that have massive repercussions over time, but which the public don't necessarily understand, because, like, who wants to weed through petitions or permissions to take water, or all these like minor policy instruments that are, very, very, detailed and boring, frankly, but at the end of the day, like, so deeply, deeply important to the way that our hydrological and ecological protections are built.
Mm-hmm. So I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is to have people preempt that and say, we want it to be evidence-based. A good review means you're protecting the Greenbelt, you're expanding the Greenbelt, you're strengthening the Greenbelt, not harmonize, like, you're no land swaps, to set up the narrative ahead of time, meaning, here are the criteria that needs to happen in order for this to be considered good. Evidence-based is one of them. Considerate of climate is another. Considerate of Indigenous sovereignty is another. Considerate of farming policies and hydrological things. All of the things that the Coordinated Land Use Review panel suggested, and also something that's thorough, that gives some public some input. That doesn't mean you have to do workshops all across Ontario over 2 years, but an ERO posting for 60 days is just not really going to cut it. I mean, that's kind of where we're at.
And let's recognize too that we're 3 environmentalists here who have been talking about the Mike Harris government in somewhat positive terms. So doing something like this, Doug Ford, could be a beneficial legacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Debbie Crandall, we were talking about, referring to earlier, she really believes that this could be an opportunity. She was like, you can do all the campaigning you want, you can do all the groundwork you want, but sometimes it's just where luck is, like, opportunity meets preparation. And my conversation with her, she's like, this is really an opportunity. It's a review time. It's something that, we want to be seen as nation building. It's something where he wants to be seen as a leader. It's something where he might want to be able to turn the page on it. And maybe he does it in a way that we wouldn't have expected, because nobody expected Mike Harris to become the champion of the Oak Ridges Moraine, right? That wasn't even a possibility. Or parks, more parks that were created, and, all these sort of things. Sometimes the governments that are least likely to do it are the ones that actually champion it. So,
or get backed into a corner
exactly.
enough that they don't have money. They feel like they don't have a choice.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We're at the end now.
This has been an hour. Yeah, that flies by when you're having a good time. Well, thanks, Robert, for you jumped in to help us out on relatively short notice. Appreciate that.
Oh, thanks again for chatting. I always find it's like really rewarding to, talk to other people about these things instead of like chubbling away at press releases and, trying to find funding.
Yeah. Well, I guess because you've been on before, you don't have to go through the questions. So,
I was actually walking my dog this morning, kind of terrified. It's like, how will I switch up my question answer? It's to like not be repetitious.
Yeah,
Well, no, so I'm not sure we asked you the third one because we changed the third one. If we haven't, so I'll throw it at you, and if you did, then no worries. But if you didn't, then feel free. So
dun
it's
dun dun.
what?
Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, no, it's an easy one though. It's kind of like in the Ezra Klein vein of the three books question that he always asks. But this one's like, what's something that you've been enjoying recently?
Oh, something that I've been enjoying recently.
I've
I'm
got
gonna
one. I've got a quick one, actually, but I don't know. Maybe
So your
I'll
question.
I know. But it just made me think, actually, because Robert, I'm asking you this question. I feel like it might be something that you, given your vacation, might. Anyways, there's this guy who's canoeing. He's an Aussie. He's canoeing across Canada, and he's got a like I've been following him on social media, and it's kind of fun. I'll throw the link in the show notes.
I have been paddling with my kids, as you know, and that is like it was our 10th anniversary of our big family trip this year. So yeah, and we were in Algonquin Park and they had a fire ban, and everyone was like, "Oh no, there's a fire ban. What are you gonna do?" And actually, like we had headlamps down at the shoreline catching crayfish, and we set up a moth sheet to like see what was kind of flying into the sheet and checking it out. So there's like so much there's so much good there. Yeah.
But what? So do you have something you want to share that you've been enjoying recently?
What have I been reading lately? I've been reading that new Robert McFarlane book on the rights of the river. I forget the name of it. I've been reading it and it's been amazing, and now I forget the name of it.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that and add it to
What's
the
this?
show
What's a
notes.
brief synopsis about it?
Okay, so he's just overgoing kind of like that movement to give legal rights to waterways, and looking at like speaking to the activists and the advocates behind those movements in different areas of the world, whether they be Central South America or Quebec or wherever else. And he's kind of like this Barry Lopez-esque nature writer, but I would say more in a modern kind of sense, which is it's not so like I don't know how much like environmental politics based, but he's not so like deep ecology based. He's kind of like more progressive in his thinking, which is nice.
Speaking of deep ecology, Joanna Macy passed on recently.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the spring, I think, or like a few months ago. Yeah.
Huh.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us, and we're going to wrap up. But again, if you appreciate the podcast, leave us a rating, and we'd love that.
All right.
The more stars, the better. Yeah, but we're here most Tuesdays, and so we'll see you then. Thanks again, Robert.
Thank you, folks.
Everyone.
Bye, Robert.